that's how you can easily be upset, quote unquote, that Africans sold Africans. It's a intentional divergence to what actually happened in order for us to be disconnected to our African brothers and sisters. They want us to be disconnected, just like when they brought a lot of our ancestors over to make sure they wouldn't keep the tribes together because they didn't want any connections. It was all done intentionally. And sometimes, even to this day, we're unaware of those intentions. And so we actually look at our African brothers and sisters as different. Again, we have a unique experience, but that difference was intentionally put there. And I wanted to highlight that cut because that's why we'll say what I'll say something silly like African souls or our African brothers sold us. We'll say that without other context. Go ahead, Queen.
I mean, I guess it's complex because, like he was saying, yeah, there are some groups that really did do that, and then there was some there was Queen and Zenga, like they fought against slavery once they realized what exactly was happening. They didn't know what was happening, or to the extent, and in their mind, because slavery obviously has existed since time immemorial. Don't do that, baby. Since time immemorial, but not in the iteration of how chattel slavery was. So there certainly were people that fought against it, certainly groups that were terrorized by Europeans, and they were warring with other people anyway. All right, we'll go ahead and take them. And there were groups that were actively involved, and they didn't care even if they knew or didn't know what exactly was going on. And I say that because I've been to slave castles and they had little cutouts, windows in the top where Africans were listening in to make sure, to keep track if anybody was trying to, foment any kind of rebellion or anything like that. So absolutely, they certainly were involved. But, the thing is, they never did come to get us. They never did do that. And I don't even see from their side how they're really linking up now. I've had Africans, say y'all are slaves or were slaves and things of that nature. I mean, it could be, they might hear negative propaganda about us too.
If I can highlight, it ain't that they may be here. That's what I would like. That's part of the dialogue, part of the dialogue. And we've had conversations about how Africans and African Americans see one another. And I've had people, if you will, from both sides and people that have grown up and, here and went back there and that type of thing. And in these conversations, what you absolutely discover is the intentional propaganda of how they see us. And how intentional propaganda of how we see them is. Once you understand that intentionality, then you have a better understanding, quote unquote, for why there is a divide. And when the word that you used that I feel was the most beautiful was when you said complex. When you get better at saying, I want to be more exact in what I'm learning. And again, not accepting really anyone's story, just understanding that his story is a perspective. It is someone's perspective. And so when you don't, and I'm not saying you did this, but when it's not connected to a scientific methodology for accurate, what's the word? Accurate, for being accurate, if you will. When it's not connected, then what happens is you have to be aware of whose history and whose perspective you're learning from. And so that's where there would absolutely be a connection if we wasn't buying into the propaganda. Because as that brother said, that the complex history is all groups have done what he just mentioned. What he mentioned was that he says it's a minority of those who are, quote unquote, I'll just use this to make it quick, the slave catchers. They absolutely did exist, right? The absolute slave catchers that whatever, they were in battle with another group and they made agreements with the Europeans for guns. And now that I got these guns and these Europeans can't go into inner Africa because of their skin color, we'll go do it for you. I'm not devoid of that being a history, but I'll tell you, when I let the propaganda lead me when I'm younger, I learned that, and I'm mad at my African brothers because in my young mind, without being accurate, I'm generalizing and saying, "Damn, look at how our African brothers." Like I'm only getting a piece of the story. Is my